Welcome back to the newest RTS 2024. Uncapped Games, after several years of development, is ready to reveal what they've been working on, which is a very unique entry to the RTS genre, significantly different than StarCraft 2 or some of the other games currently in development. Though comparisons are going to be inevitable, because we're currently watching matches between the lead developers, David Kim and Stefan Haynes. And yes, that David Kim, the lead balance designer / scapegoat of StarCraft 2, Wings of Liberty, Heart of the Swarm, and Legacy of the Void. And to my understanding, Stefan worked at Relic Entertainment on some of the older Company of Heroes and other titles, so that's a lot of RTS, especially specifically multiplayer RTS experience in this game, which is narrowly focused on just multiplayer RTS. 1v1 and 2v2, the only modes in the game. Not sure about co-op in the future. Don't believe there's any plans for a campaign. It is all about high intensity, action-packed, real-time strategy. Or if you want to be a little pedantic, more like tactics. But speaking of being a little pedantic, you're going to hear me call it the game. That's because, even as of this point, I don't even know the name. So after you like and subscribe, we'll know the name with the reveal, which will be right when this video is released. So let me know what you think of it. I'm so ready to be disappointed. I've got some ideas. But jumping back in. First, throw out your conceptions of StarCraft 2, like building workers, building supply depots, building production. No. You build bases, which all cost the same, you and your opponent. And then you build units instantly out of your command center. One of 50 units or so that are in the game right now, and counting. I've played a bit of the game, and full disclosure, Uncapped invited myself and other RTS enthusiasts, some of which might have videos as well if you want to check them out, to play the game a couple months ago. Still didn't tell us the name, but... And the general consensus, if that's what you're looking for. At first, it feels simplistic. There's only so many units, there's almost no macro, but it's addicting. The games are fast, usually around 5 or so minutes, even though the timer goes up to 10 minutes, or down from 10 minutes. After 10 minutes, whoever's the highest score, which is like resources mined plus units killed, wins the game. Almost never gets there. I'd say average game right around 5 minutes, easily shorter, sometimes later, but around 5 minutes. General consensus is that it felt like a 15 to 20 minute late game StarCraft 2 sort of game. And that's because the entire time you're just fighting. And speaking of, David has the Blinks and the Crusaders. He's got these mobile units with a tanky front line. And he's going for the bases of Stefan, but Stefan has the Shockers on the back line for his tier 2 unit, which are less of a meat shield. Or I guess a bolt shield in this case, as they're all kind of robots. We'll go over that. But instead, more of a backline artillery with a chain lightning sort of attack. So, while there are 50 units in the game, there's not factions or races or stuff like that. You only bring 8 to the table at any one time. Your loadout is decided before the game, and both players know what the other player's loadout is. Like David now bringing out the snipers at an ideal time to save the day before his core is destroyed. So, you got 2 tier 1 units, 2 tier 2, 2 tier 3, and 2 wild cards you can choose on your loadout. Oh, thank you, David. So, you see here, as we're just watching his perspective, I assume an observer interface will be able to do this anytime. And the icons here, obviously, you don't know them yet, but they get pretty recognizable quite easily once you play the game a little bit. But David's got Blinks, Crusaders, Snipers, and I want to say those are Heavy Mammoths. And he's chosen the Foundry tech path, which is that top row there, as well as the Advanced Foundry. In order to unlock the Star Forge, you got to tech up, which takes the same amount of time and resources as building a new base. So you have a very clear choice between, do I expand or do I tech up? And that once that base finishes, your workers come online and passively mine. I'm not sure if they have official names, but I'm going to call it matter and energy. And you do have a supply cap, but no supply depots or anything like that. That takes away from the fighting. So, that means David now checking how far along Stefan's Starforge tech is. So he knows he won't be dealing with those sort of units until it comes online. But you can already see him being a little cautious as he realizes the tech is about to come up. And up indeed, as the Falcons are raining down. Much like Liberators in StarCraft 2 with some heavy anti-ground potential. All air units will attack while moving. And I'm reasonably sure all air units, even the anti-air units, have an anti-ground attack. This is just to make it not feel terrible when you have just air-to-air units. But there are definitely units that are more focused on anti-ground potential and stuff like that. Generally, I've found that air units are very weak in order to make up for their mobility, with the notable exceptions of things like Falcons, which are clearly kind of like a anti-ground liberator sort of unit. But now Tier 3 tech online, the Heavy Mammoths, with their big guns ready to go. Units of each tier are relatively comparable in DPS and strength, but it all comes down to where you put them. And oh my god, he completely missed it. David gets caught out. So even though you know when your opponent's expanding, and you know when they're teching up, that doesn't mean you know where their units are. Just completely caught. He loses his base before even hitting his opponents at all. And Stefan just continues through to the core. David trying to intercept the army, but Stefan just goes for it. Is there enough? He pulls out some Crusaders to draw fire directly out of the base, but reinforcements arrive for Stefan. A small base trade, but that any amount of units not in this fight is gonna spell disaster. Is terrible. Terrible damage is being dealt. And there's just far too much. David taps it out.
Keep your head up.
And I think David was thinking too hard. In my amateur opinion. Oh, we're gonna jump into... Let's go into a Wasp game. David goes Wasp this game. All the videos I have are titled by just the units they've decided to build. Which I guess makes sense, because if you have 50 units, but you could only bring 8, it's not like Terran versus Protoss. It's like Wasps versus Butterflies. No, that's not like a documentary narrated by David Attenborough. It's the game. But units are very intuitive, is what I found. In fact, Jimmy, do we have the... So, units like the Wasp, core units, so far, and here you can see the models kind of close up, where, whether you have, can only attack workers. There's some interesting little features, but just scrolling through, these are some of the units we have so far. I'm still scrolling, yeah. Hopefully at some point we'll have a better list than just a spreadsheet, because spreadsheets are for nerds. Back to the action, but maybe I'll just scroll through slowly at the end of the video, if you guys get there. And you can check out the units. But so far they've intentionally not provided direct stats, like this unit does 5 damage, but instead this unit does high, low, medium damage. Because everything's in flux, and the intent is to... Very much unlike StarCraft 2, the intent will be to make certain units stronger or weaker, or maybe even ban certain units during like a week or two in order to kind of shift up the meta. I'm not sure how much variety we're going to see in maps and stuff like that, but very much the unit loadouts, which can be switched between games very quickly. And even when I was playing, they already have some presets and stuff like that. I mean, it's a classic strat, right? Well, in this case, it's essentially a Wasp Rush, which he's just killing workers. But even when I was playing with some other RTS enthusiasts, it was a very common strat to get beat by something and immediately pick those same units and try to beat your opponent with them in the next 5-minute game, which is it's a very addicting format they've latched onto here. So honestly, I'm really looking forward to it. Remember, this is not sponsored, and the game, I believe, I'm reasonably sure is going to be free to play, where the revenue is from skins, cosmetics, and just like unlocking. Actually, all I know about is skins and cosmetics. So, oh, they're the. Oh my god! He just killed all the workers with 2 Ooh. And they take some time to respawn, you can see there. Both sides going for the worker lines. You can tell David Kim's playing this game. Well, in this case, literally, but... We've got some anti-air units. Not sure what those little rabbit bots are, but the scorpions are pretty clear.
Units reporting damage.
Oh, wasps and stingers, the fastest units. Very, very high DPS and very, very fragile. But there's no way that's enough. Those are anti-air units. They're incredibly weak compared to some more well-suited counterparts. And David just running over, sprinting, gliding. I gotta say, I want to go back and look at the wasp animation because it's my favorite unit.
Every win is earned. Bravo.
It feels. I just want to talk about the engine itself. I don't know what engine they're using. It's not quite StarCraft 2, at least from my experience. It's not quite like playing StarCraft 2 yet. But after a little practice, it can feel very similar, both in how the units move, how they respond to commands. Okay, we don't need the volume on it. I just wanted to slow it down. But the units move and respond to commands very similarly to StarCraft 2. It feels very responsive. They still have some stuff to work out with, like, unit pathfinding in these big groups like this and stuff like that. Especially melee units. You know, your classic RTS issues. But the animations, I will say, the units act like they look. And even though there's a ton of units in the game, they all kind of fill the role you think they do. Like, I'm not even sure what that unit is. It clearly looks like a medium-tier support bot. Fires off missiles. Seems like it's not particularly maneuverable. Like, it's not well-suited to be fighting this massive, speedy, very mobile army. And we can see it does not do well. And that's my experience so far. Oh, is it too fast? No, my god, they're just that fast, those units. Let's throw in a 2v2. They sent me a ton of games. We're not going to be able to watch all of them, but...
And resource base warmed up and working.
Yes, 2v2. On Mars. From my understanding, I feel like I don't need to say that every time. All of this is from my understanding. I'm not necessarily perfectly up to date, but the game does... It's quite far along. I'm not sure, in the reveal you're about to see or have already seen, what they're going to announce, but it feels like you could play this game today and not be disappointed with the functionality. They've worked really hard on making a very coherent sort of game where everything feels intuitive, the systems are there. I think they're really filling out a lot of the more customizability and kind of personalization stuff, but that's just speculation from me. So, and again, it's a very different sort of game than StarCraft 2 or Age of Empires. It is much more like tower defense, wave defense with a lot of micro. I'll tell you, I've watched Clem play. Clem is going to be very good at this game. Clem figured out a trick with the blinks. The blink units, like on day one. He figured out how to use them to target fire better than they would if they were just A-moving. So they're already... I don't know if that was intentional, but there's clearly, kind of like StarCraft or even Brood War, little details of the engine that don't necessarily make the units feel worse, but give them potential past even what your average A-moving player would do. So, well, we saw all the units there for a moment, but... Well, I'll go back. I'll go back for one. I want to see what the loadouts of the enemies are. And David did too, clearly. So, David's got some shockers. He's got bombers loaded out as well in his wildcard slot. I don't know if I talked about the wildcard slot. The interesting part is you can pick one tier 1 unit, well, 2 tier 1 units, 1 tier 2 unit from each the Starforge and the Foundry, one Tier 3 from the Advanced Starforge and the Advanced Foundry, and then one wildcard unit, which could be any unit from any building. It could just be another Tier 1 unit, though. As you can see, most players have not chosen a weak-looking one. Stefan over there has a Kraken, which is the closest thing to a hero unit in the game at the moment. So we'll see if that makes it to the field. I'm not sure how much it costs, but I know it's much, much more than your average Tier 2 or Tier 3 unit. I believe that's going to be the end game goal, and I think David was just checking in on that. He's got the recalls for Tier 1, which a lot of the Tier 1 units are almost painfully on the nose of what they are. The recalls, and this is going to sound crazy, recall to any of your bases on a relatively short cooldown. So you can quickly recall back. They're a slow unit with decent DPS, but that is balanced out by the fact you could be teleporting across the entire map to defend, or to an extent attack, depending on your mobility. I'm not sure if I talked about... It seems like the maps are going to be on, like, Earth, Mars. I'm hoping for some, the moon. Now, if you look not too closely, you can easily recognize it's the same layout as the Earth map. It's just the tile set that's different. I'm not sure how much interest there's going to be in very different maps. From my understanding, there it is again. The balancing will mostly be done through changes to the units and loadouts and stuff like that, as opposed to making different terrain features or different ways of gathering resources. So, much more about the unit tactics than using the map for against your opponents. As you can see, it's a pretty wide open field. It's just the general look and feel that shifted slightly. In this case, it's kind of just recolored. With two players on each side, clearly, both teams quite timid to get into a fight, because that could snowball out of control quickly. I can't imagine 2v2 is any less volatile than 1v1, which is already hectic. Blinks from the right side, recalls trying to hold the line. Some stingers cutting through the front, but the Hornets alongside them suffer from a lack of range that puts them right alongside the stingers and exposes them to fire. So Team David moving towards that fourth base, could recall back. Oh, able to take out a base. But the orange team going straight up the center. Stefan taking full advantage. About half the... Oh, there it is. The Kraken has arrived. In case you couldn't notice. Alright. Wow. Well, it's got some massive... It doesn't look like it has that much DPS, but it is clearly much tankier than any other unit. Some Locusts flying in support. Stefan's Kraken and his teammates Locust here, forcing David to respond. He actually recalled out, abandoning many of his teammates. He abandoned his teammate's entire army in order to salvage some of his own, because his teammate does not have recalls, cannot pull out of the fight. So he's desperate to kill the Kraken, and there's no way to heal units. So it looks like the Kraken will cleave a path through absolutely everything. Ballista come out, but I don't think they even hit air. So, this seems bad. As they lose the third base down the center, David concedes. The teammate's a little slower. And yeah, wow. All right. Let's jump into another 1v1. David versus Stefan. Let's see, we got Blink Airship Falcon with Recall and Dragonflies. So a very fancy game for David, as the entire title of this game is his units and not even bothering. Oh, versus recall with Dragon. Okay, I'm being unfair.
Horizon. We serve the prime. I am Blink. Standing strong.
The blinks
Loaded.
at early game, it feel very much like microing stalkers.
Blink
StarCraft 2.
prime.
I believe you can even dodge some projectiles. But I not 100% on the details. And the details are sure subject to change as well. Just checking.
Enemy
Interesting.
turning on. Resource base warmed up and working.
Can we go back for a moment? I want to see Stefan's loadout there. David was actually looking it over as well. So, multiple air units for Stefan on the Starforge. The Starforge doesn't necessarily mean air, but it has most of the air units focused on it. Yeah, just take another look. Both players gain resources at the exact same rate in the early game. The main base has more workers than any other base, so it is the main focus of your economy. I believe it's 32 workers, like 8 per patch, as opposed to 6 or 4 on the outlying bases, something like that. Wouldn't be. It's pretty easy to confirm. Each worker has a set amount of resources it gathers. So destroying a worker has a clear amount of resources you deny over the next minute as it's rebuilt.
Enemy is building a
That's the general rule is everything is obvious. You can see it all, no matter how much you blink. It's which units you brought to the table and how you use them against your opponents. And Stefan has the recalls, which are significantly less mobile in general. They're just a slower unit. And David is abusing that with Blink Micro here, picking off recalls which can't teleport away. They can only teleport to bases, which isn't very helpful when the blinks are already on said bases. David using that blink for map control. A 4th base already on the way, whereas Stefan is heading towards Tier 2 tech.
Blink on standby. Blanks fire.
I can very much see it. I'm very interested how a best of whatever series of units would play out. I can imagine a situation... Oh, the early dragonflies. I can imagine a situation where maybe the losing player is able to switch out 2 units and the winning player only switches out 1, something like that. Not sure if some sort of draft mode would be good. I think that would kind of... So the key to the game is how quick. It kind of reminds me of like a fighting game, where rounds last not too long, and then you get into another round. You just jump into another round. Choose a different fighter, maybe. I don't know fighting games that well. I don't know if that's common. But maybe a different stage. And then you get back into it.
Workers under attack.
Alright, the worker harass continues. The airships, most directly for dealing with... Oh my god, they are very directly dealing with the air. The Falcons, though, being caught. As David tries to press forward to the front. Seemingly confident he can handle this fight. It looks like Stefan has more units. And that's because he does. Alright. A bit of an overcommitment there, and Stefan will take full advantage. But... Well, David has 4 bases, but a base without any workers doesn't mine or gather any resources. So,
Units reporting damage.
I'm not sure how much it's worth it to do this kind of pressure. But David still has more bases and eventually will have more workers. So we can lean on that and take slightly less cost-effective fights and win a war of attrition, potentially. The Dragonflies, though, so maneuverable. Airships moving in to counter. And clearly well designed for dealing with anti-air, but the Dragonflies eventually overwhelm with sheer numbers. The Falcons wiping out the ground, but the Dragonflies survive yet again. More airships joining the fray. Just rallying out from that command center. There are control groups, there's patrol, there's hold position, all your basic commands. Though the one thing I'm pulling for is some sort of command card, which currently doesn't exist. So hopefully a command card and some camera locations are on the agenda soon. I believe camera locations are in the game, but not like a quick base camera switch.
You got a resource base destroyed.
Generally, the game is designed to be super intuitive, and I think it succeeds at that. I really try to kind of pull back on my... Because as someone who's played StarCraft 2 for a decade and a half, I have some preconceptions, some biases about RTS, and about what level of complexity is both necessary and like a demonstration of skill. So, I do agree that having like a super complicated interface is both adds a lot of, we're going to use a lot of buzzwords here, I'm sorry, but friction when it comes to getting into the game. It feels like you have to fight the UI, and then you fight your opponent, but your opponent's already fighting you, and you're still trying to figure out what the hotkey for Wasps is, for example. Everything's on grid keys here so far in the game, but I'm not sure how much customizability will be allowed over time. I can't imagine an RTS that doesn't at least give you some options, but I think grid keys do cover the vast majority. And it appears David's strategy was... I'm sorry, I got a little distracted, but clearly that later game heavy economy attrition strategy works out better than the more common trades from stuff. And let's see, maybe we can get one more game.
1060.
Scorpion Beetle Bomber, that sounds good. The SBB push. Here we go. I'm gonna, okay. So, I'm gonna try my hand at it. As most of the videos you see here on this channel, after you like and subscribe, are me commentating StarCraft 2 games. But they weren't always. But that kind of takes away from my point. We're gonna treat this one like a professional match and do my best to give you my commentary on the game. David in the bottom left corner, Stefan in the top right. Scorpions to start things off, and quickly heading towards tier 2 tech. David, as he gets to that 400 energy count, going to be looking for either a third base or the tech, and opts for the third with those Scorpions. Same for Stefan, and I quickly realize how hard it is to commentate on the strategy unless we have both of the unit cards up. I like the little Scorpion. I'm sorry, I got... Can you tell David is a StarCraft player at heart? Just constantly bringing up and closing menus and spamming. Nobody can see your APM, David. Well, Scorpion's heading forward. As tier 2 is about to start. I don't know, maybe he's trying to distract Stefan from going for his tech. His 400 energy is loaded up. David responds. The Scorpion's waiting. The recall's pinned back to the base. Scouting forward with just one. Spots the recalls. There's more of them somewhere. That's not enough to account for all the resources. The Scorpion's waiting for their opportunity. As both sides should have comparable levels. A fourth base taken on either side. Continually darting forward. A surprisingly tense standoff, considering we're already 2 minutes into the match. Usually the action has started by now, but I seem to have chosen the only game where they haven't started ripping each other's faces off. As these are some relatively immobile compositions. The recall can move around between the bases, which means the Scorpions won't have an opportunity to really either pick off workers or take a winning fight until there's some tier 2 tech online, because they are... At least I'm reasonably sure melee units. Tier 3 tech already. As he goes for... Oh, the bombers! Ah, yes. Which are exactly what they sound like, bashing through the front. Bombing into the recalls and streaming in behind with the Scorpions. What's more, into the breach, he recalls back, which repositions. It makes it a little easier. One way, something of a pseudo blink there. But more bombers are on the way. You see them rallying across the minimap. We've got recall hunters as well. The other recall unit with a little bit more of a punch. But the bombers are just trickling through and taking out the masses of units. The Scorpion bomber composition, more than enough to overwhelm. And the Scorpions are easily going to run down the base. Looks like David not confident he's actually going to take the base out outright, or he's so confident he's taking his time. Because if you take the base out, you take out all the workers with it. My god, those bombers are so excited to do their jobs. Alright.
Units you got a resource
Well, oh
base
my.
taking fire.
Cat bus on the field. Massive. I mean, they just look like someone sawed off a soda can, but
Under attack.
recalls to the top left. Cat bus defense. I think those are cat bus.
Destroyed. Units
I remember David being quite excited about those units. But a very heavy tier 3 air to ground. Not sure how much anti-air capability they have, and not sure how relevant it is. But Beetles, I think, is the name of those anti-air mechs that are fighting currently. Oh my god, he has so many of them. The bomber's so excited!
under attack.
Bombers again coming in, trying to wipe out the recalls. And the anti-air bots, not quite enough. That looks like a critical mass. Unless you have some direct anti-air, it's just not enough. The units are getting whittled down. And David heads for the concede button instead. Just a little bit too much. All right, we got time for one more, I think. All right, one more game. And now I'll just spend this game giving my general opinions. I think everyone who's played any Direct Strike or StarCraft 2 is going to want to try out this game. They didn't even give me like a wish list link or something like that. I assume it's going to be out on Steam. But whenever you figure out the name along with me, make sure to keep an eye out for it. And the interesting thing is I don't think this overlaps with StarCraft or other up-and-coming games. It's just, honestly, it's kind of this middle ground between your sort of conventional RTS, your base-building RTS, and your sort of MOBA-style game, or even auto-battlers like Direct Strike. So, I'm not sure where it's going to land, but it's a very, I will commend them on a very narrow focus. I think nowadays, you can easily get bogged down trying to make so much of a game that you're not focused on any one part. This game is focused entirely on the small-scale multiplayer. Not necessarily small scale of the battles, but it is just the multiplayer. So, if they can do that well, they will pull ahead of any other sort of similar game, as they can focus all their efforts on it. Now, as for design, I'm not a huge fan of a bunch of units that teleport across the map or win the game in seconds. I'd like a few more seconds on the clock, right? Things like the recall, I'm still a bit iffy on having a mechanic that just teleports everything out. But when you play with it, I feel like you gotta consider it less of a single one-off game and more of, I tried this loadout and now I go into another battle, I try another loadout. As opposed to having a direct build order. The build orders are very simple. All the units cost a similar amount. When you expand, you automatically gain the resources. You don't have to send the workers to mine. You can't run them away even if you wanted to. All you can do is defend your base and defend your workers. So, all the units are quite intuitive, and the engine is very responsive. There's some UI and control schemes that I would very much like to have that come from years of StarCraft experience. I like Beyond All Reason with the ability to drag a formation or line out on the field. As of right now, it is just your standard like A move or manually splitting, as you'll see David do a lot of. David actually still an incredibly high APM. Oh, those are mortars. The mortars siege up and blast. They're a siege tank. They hit real hard. As you can see over there, they walk up, lay down their turret, and get to blasting. I think those are the Swift Shockers.
Cut the chatter. Charge.
Yeah, I'm not... So, the environment design, I think, could use a bit of iteration, but I really love the unit design. I love how simple they are, how obvious the units are, and how, like how intuitive it is. Like, you have these Scorpions, which are clearly a weak melee unit, that are quite maneuverable, though obviously not as maneuverable as the Wasp that we saw earlier. And I can definitely see whether it's like weekly or bi-weekly or monthly patches that buff certain units or even remove certain units from the roster to make things more interesting. Was he about to tap out of the game? Are these mortars that strong? The snipers are good, but I don't think they have the range. They do have the range. Huh. Wow. Okay. Well, that seems quite good. I like how many of the units are just legs on a big gun. All the units that aren't literal animals or insects are essentially, they're mostly their own weapon. They got 2 legs just to move this gun around. And I don't know if I mentioned it, but apparently the lore, such as it is you are in the command post controlling units like a robot army that you're manufacturing. I don't know if you're in some sort of war game or you're fighting a battle with an enemy force. Either way, I don't really care. But at least that's your little rationale behind it. Oh my. Well, those snipers seem pretty good.
Easy now. What's the wind? Fire. Sniper's ready.
And there you go. GG. Let's see if we can see it at the very start. But, yeah. There. It looks a little weird, but you can see it right at the command post at the start. Gets me. Well, not every time. I barely ever notice it, but when I'm looking at it, I think that needs some updating. No, it looks really weird. But the idea is there. So, there you've seen it. Uncapped Games, unnamed game. Well, it'll be in the title. Let me know. With its fast-paced, action-oriented, very counter-intensive okay, it's real-time tactics. It's direct strike with micro. And it's something very different than we've seen. I will definitely be playing as it gets released, and I've been providing feedback as well. If you got questions or comments, I know the devs are looking very closely, and I can be sure to pass some along. But I think what's important, I'm not saying don't think of StarCraft 2 when you're playing or thinking about the game. But it's something different. And at first I was very skeptical, but now I'm very optimistic. Not even that cautiously. I've played it. Feels good. And will be worth your time to check out. So make sure to check out whatever reveal they got planned. And I expect that people will be able to play this sooner rather than later. So hopefully you enjoyed. Like and subscribe for more uncapped, untitled content. And if enough people are interested, maybe we get an interview with David Kim and ask him about his thoughts on the Widowmine. I mean, the Scorpion. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time. Good luck, have fun. Stay chill.